Stellantis confirmed the plans to CNBC by email. Quote, Stellantis continues to look for opportunities to improve efficiency and optimize its footprint to ensure future competitiveness in today's rapidly changing global market.
Imagine waking up, scrolling through car news, and suddenly seeing headlines screaming that Stellantis just detonated a bomb under the entire auto market. Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler aren't just slashing prices a little bit, they've carved a massive 35% right off the MSRP. That's not a sale. That's not a seasonal discount. That's a direct, unprecedented strike at the heart of how cars have been priced for decades. And here's the twist. This isn't a simple attempt to move a few extra trucks or sedans. This is Stellantis flipping the table, rewriting the rulebook, and forcing every automaker in America and maybe the world to panic. Why? Because a move this aggressive doesn't just shake up dealerships. It threatens Wall Street's confidence, disrupts the supply chain, and rewires the psychology of car buyers overnight. If you thought Tesla's price cuts rocked the EV world, what Stellantis is doing right now is even bigger, and it's about to pull Ford, GM, Toyota, and even the luxury brands into a war they never thought they'd have to fight. And the scariest part? This isn't desperation, it looks like strategy. For years, Stellantis has been criticized as the underdog in America. Ram trucks have had moments of glory, Dodge has lived off muscle car nostalgia, and Chrysler has been hanging on with just a couple of models. But out of nowhere, instead of retreating, they've chosen to go nuclear. A 35% cut means that trucks, SUVs, and even performance cars are suddenly sitting in the same price territory as budget imports. Imagine walking into a dealership where a brand new Ram 1500 is priced dangerously close to a Toyota Tacoma. Picture a Dodge Charger suddenly competing dollar for dollar with a Honda Accord. These aren't hypothetical ripples, these are shockwaves tearing through the market as customers rethink everything they thought they knew about value, performance, and prestige. Dealers from competing brands are already terrified because how do you convince a beer to pay more for less when Stellantis just made affordability the headline of the decade? But here's the secret nobody's talking about yet. Stellantis didn't just wake up and randomly decide to light the industry on fire. Behind closed doors, they've been preparing for a moment like this, building up excess inventory, fine-tuning cost structures, and waiting for the exact point when their rivals were most vulnerable. And right now, Ford and GM are drowning in unsold trucks, Toyota is struggling with its strategy, and Tesla's margins are getting squeezed thinner every quarter. Stellantis saw weakness, and instead of waiting, they went for the jugular. This isn't just about selling more cars, it's about stealing entire segments, capturing market share overnight, and forcing their rivals into a corner where they either match the cuts and bleed billions, or sit still and watch Stellantis eat their lunch. And while most people are still reeling from the headline number 35% off MSRP, the real chaos is happening behind the scenes. Wall Street analysts are scrambling to figure out if this is sustainable. Suppliers are panicking about whether their margins will survive. And governments are watching closely because when an automaker rewires the price structure of the industry, it doesn't just affect dealerships. It hits jobs, loan markets, and even inflation data. This is the kind of move that reshapes not just car buying, but the entire economy around it. And the wildest part, customers don't care about sustainability. They don't care about investor panic. They care about walking into a dealership and driving out in a brand new Ram or Dodge at a price that was unthinkable just weeks ago. Ram is where the shockwaves feel the strongest. For years, the pickup market has been dominated by Ford's F-150, GM's Silverado, and Sierra. And Ram has always been the scrappy competitor with loyal fans, but not the overwhelming. Then comes Dodge, a brand that has long thrived on adrenaline, horsepower, and identity. The Charger and Challenger have been icons of raw American muscle, but often priced just high enough to scare away average buyers. Now, with 35% cut from MSRP, Dodge is opening the floodgates. Picture high school graduates, young professionals, and blue-collar workers suddenly realizing they can actually own a brand new Charger for the same price as a used Toyota Camry or Honda Civic. That's not just appealing, it's dangerous for competitors. Because Dodge isn't just selling cars, it's selling culture. The kind of culture that hooks you once and never lets go. If Dodge manages to put thousands of new buyers behind the wheel this year, they could lock in a new generation of loyalists right when the rest of the industry is struggling to capture youth interest in cars at all. And then Chrysler, the brand many thought was fading into irrelevance. For years, Chrysler has survived on the Pacifica and little else, but with this move, Stellantis may have just thrown them a lifeline. Families looking at minivans or three-row SUVs who would have gone to Toyota, Honda, or Kia are now staring at Chrysler models with prices that make even used cars look overpriced. This is Chrysler's chance to claw its way back into relevance, not just as a discount brand, but as a serious player in the family vehicle market. And here's the kicker: if Chrysler starts moving serious volume again, it changes the internal balance of Stellantis itself, giving the brand fresh blood and more investment for future models. But while Stellantis is celebrating, rivals are entering full-blown crisis mode. Ford's F-150 Lightning and GM's Silverado E were supposed to be the flashy, forward-looking solutions to sagging truck profits. Now, they risk being overshadowed not by another EV competitor, but by Stellantis' brutal pricing on gas-powered trucks. Toyota, which has always leaned on reliability as its calling card, suddenly finds itself unable to justify charging premium prices when Stellantis just shifted the value equation by an entire generation. Even Tesla, whose strategy has been built on cutting prices to spark demand, is watching closely because Stellantis just proved that legacy automakers can play that game too. And at a scale Tesla may not be able to withstand. And while all of this is playing out, the consumer mindset is shifting at light speed. Buyers who were once hesitant, waiting for interest rates to drop or inflation to ease, are now rushing to dealerships, afraid of missing out. Demand is surging so quickly that some Stellantis dealers are already warning of potential shortages, which is ironic because just months ago, lots were overflowing with unsold vehicles. This sudden swing could become the most dramatic shift in supply and demand the US auto industry has seen since the financial crisis of 2008. On Wall Street, the reaction has been nothing short of chaos. Analysts who had pegged Stellantis as a conservative, slow-moving automaker are now scrambling to rewrite their forecasts. The stock market thrives on predictability, but a 35% MSRP cut is the opposite of predictable. It's disruptive, aggressive, and potentially world-altering. Some investors are calling it brilliant, predicting a massive spike in sales volume that could cement Stellantis as the most dominant US player in just a few quarters. Others are terrified, warning that this move could spark a brutal price war that burns through cash reserves and destabilizes the entire industry. If Ford, GM, or Toyota feel forced to follow Stellantis down this road, profits across the sector could evaporate almost overnight. Imagine billions in value wiped off balance sheets in a matter of months all because one company refused to play by the old rules. Regulators are watching this carefully too. Price cuts sound good for consumers, but when an automaker shakes the market this violently, there are ripple effects. Think about the financing sector. Banks and lenders that issued auto loans based on old car values are suddenly exposed. Cars bought at higher prices last year now look drastically overvalued, leaving lenders holding risky loans. Resale values are crashing in real time, threatening used car dealers and auction houses. And with inflation already a political lightning rod, regulators may step in if they think Stellantis' strategy destabilizes entire markets. We've seen governments step in before when industries threaten economic balance, and with millions of jobs tied to auto manufacturing, politicians can't ignore this kind of shockwave. Globally, automakers outside the US are feeling the pressure. In Europe, where Stellantis already has strong roots with brands like Peugeot, Citroën, and Fiat, executives are quietly debating whether a similar move could be exported overseas. But Europe's market is heavily regulated, with slimmer margins and tighter emissions rules. Pulling off a 35% cut there would be nearly impossible without severe consequences. Meanwhile, in Japan, Toyota and Honda executives are watching nervously, worried that US buyers who might have chosen Japanese imports will now be sucked into Stellantis' orbit. And in China, the most competitive auto market in the world, local automakers are studying this move as a case study in how aggressive pricing can flip entire industries. But perhaps the most fascinating reaction comes from inside Stellantis itself. Insiders say this was not a last-minute gamble, it was part of a calculated long-term plan. Stellantis has quietly streamlined its supply chains, negotiated aggressive deals with parts suppliers, and embraced platform sharing on a massive scale. That means they can build multiple vehicles on the same architecture, drastically cutting costs. This efficiency is what gave them the confidence to pull the trigger on a 35% cut. Where Ford or GM might bleed cash trying to match it, Stellantis believes it can weather the storm. If that's true, then this isn't just a price war, it's a structural shift in the auto industry that could permanently alter who survives and who doesn't. And yet, behind all the numbers, all the Wall Street panic, and all the global ripple effects, the story always comes back to the consumer. Families who thought a new car was out of reach now find themselves walking into showrooms, ready to sign. Young buyers who assumed they'd have to settle for used cars are now taking home brand new Dodges. Small businesses that couldn't justify a fleet refresh are suddenly buying Rams in bulk. The streets of America could very soon look different, filled with Stellantis vehicles at every corner. A rolling reminder that one bold move changed everything. Rival automakers are not going to sit quietly while Stellantis eats into their market share. Behind closed doors, Ford and GM are already plotting countermoves, but their options are limited. Matching a 35% MSRP cut outright would be financial suicide, yet doing nothing risks hemorrhaging customers. So instead, they're likely to lean heavily on hidden incentives, massive rebates, extended 0% financing, lease buyouts, and even backdoor dealer cash to mask the price cuts without admitting they've lost control of the sticker price. Ford, in particular, is desperate to protect the F-150, the crown jewel of its lineup. If Ram succeeds in repositioning the 1500 as the most affordable full-size truck in America, Ford risks losing not just sales, but the very identity of its most profitable product. GM, meanwhile, is torn. On one side, the Silverado and Sierra are critical moneymakers. On the other, GM has poured billions into EVs and can't afford to get dragged into a brutal gas-powered price war. Insiders say GM may double down on marketing the Silverado EV as future-proof while quietly slashing prices on gas models through dealer channels. But here's the problem. Consumers don't care about long-term EV promises when they can get a Ram or Dodge today at a price that feels too good to pass up. GM risks being caught flat-footed, trapped between its expensive EV pivot and the sudden devaluation of the truck market. Toyota and Honda, who have always leaned on their bulletproof reputation for reliability, face a different kind of crisis. For decades, their strategy has been to charge a little more because their cars last longer. But Stellantis just shattered that equation. If a Dodge Charger suddenly costs the same as a Honda Civic, how do you convince a beer that paying more for reliability is worth it? Toyota may lean on its hybrid dominance, pushing efficiency as the counter-argument to Stellantis' affordability. But even then, the psychological damage is done because buyers now know they can get more car for less money. And that's not an easy bell to unring. And then there's Tesla. Elon Musk's empire has been playing the price cut game for years, undercutting rivals to boost volume and spark demand. But Tesla's margin strategy is already stretched thin, and a 35% cut from a legacy automaker makes Tesla look less like a disruptor and more like a target. Imagine walking into a dealership where a Dodge Charger is sitting next to a Tesla Model 3. One offers raw horsepower, style, and muscle at a fire sale price, while the other touts EV efficiency. For the first time, Tesla doesn't automatically look like the bargain disruptor. It looks like it's fighting uphill against a competitor willing to torch the playbook even harder. Meanwhile, whispers are already circulating that lobbying efforts could intensify. Don't underestimate the influence Ford, GM, Toyota, and others have in Washington. If Stellantis' move destabilizes the auto loan market, slashes used car values, and risks layoffs at rival plants, politicians may feel pressure to protect American jobs. Subsidies, tariffs, or even regulatory hurdles could be weaponized as tools to slow Stellantis down. Because at the end of the day, car companies don't just compete on the lot, they compete in Congress too. Stellantis might be winning on price, but that doesn't mean its rivals won't fight dirty behind the scenes to shift the battlefield. And while the boardrooms and political offices play chess, the reality at ground level is turning into something nobody predicted: a feeding frenzy. Dealers who were struggling to move inventory just months ago are now overwhelmed with buyers. Social media is lighting up with stories of people scoring deals that sound too good to be true. Online forums are flooded with photos of buyers bragging about snagging a new Ram or Dodge at prices that look like mistakes. The hype alone is fueling even more demand, turning Stellantis into not just a car company, but a cultural phenomenon. This frenzy is exactly the spark that could ignite an all-out automotive arms race. Once the floodgates are open, the industry won't go back to normal pricing. It never does. Consumers who get used to 35% off today aren't going to quietly accept full MSRP tomorrow. That means Stellantis has set a new baseline, whether its rivals like it or not. Ford, GM, Toyota, Honda, even Tesla, they're now all trapped in a game of survival, where every move must outdo the last just to keep customers from bolting. And the first salvo won't just be price cuts, it'll be sweeteners layered on top. Expect to see extended warranties, free maintenance packages, record low financing rates, and loyalty programs so aggressive they'll make credit card perks look tame. Each automaker will be desperate to prove their vehicles still carry value in a world where Stellantis has effectively reset what a car is worth. But here's where it gets even wilder. This arms race doesn't just pit gas-powered vehicles against each other, it forces EVs directly into the line of fire. Tesla and GM's Ultium strategies suddenly look fragile when a family can buy a gas-powered Chrysler Pacifica or Dodge SUV for tens of thousands less than an entry-level EV. Automakers that have been pushing electric as the premium, forward-looking option may have to rethink their pitch. If Stellantis can position a Ram 1500 or Dodge Charger as both affordable and accessible, the EV narrative of pay more now for the future loses its punch. Suddenly, EV makers may be forced to slash prices faster than they planned, just to keep from bleeding buyers. And that's dangerous, because EV margins are already razor thin. And then comes the supply chain question, because let's not forget, vehicles aren't just built on pricing strategy. They're built on steel, semiconductors, batteries, and global logistics. If this arms race accelerates, suppliers will be squeezed like never before. Parts manufacturers that rely on steady contracts could see their margins collapse as automakers demand cost cuts to keep up with Stellantis' aggressive stance. That could lead to bankruptcies, consolidations, and a ripple effect across the entire global supply chain. What we're really looking at isn't just a car price war, it's a restructuring of the way cars are built, financed, and sold on a global scale. And consumers who right now are celebrating this as the best time ever to buy a new car might unknowingly be fueling something much bigger. Because once this arms race takes full form, the winners will be those who can cut costs the deepest, move the fastest, and dominate supply lines. The losers? They could disappear entirely. And in an industry this massive, when a loser falls, it takes thousands of jobs, billions in contracts, and entire communities with it. That's why insiders are calling Stellantis' move both brilliant and dangerous, because it could crown a new king of the auto market, or plunge the entire industry into a collapse that makes the 2008 crisis look small in comparison. And yet, for Stellantis, this seems to be exactly the gamble they wanted. They've positioned themselves as the aggressor, the disruptor, the company willing to do what others won't. And right now, it's working. Their lots are emptying, their headlines are dominating, and their rivals are scrambling. The only question left is, how far will they push it? Because if a 35% cut was just the opening move, imagine what comes next. If this is just the beginning, then the long-term future of the auto industry has already shifted. Think about it, Stellantis has cracked open a door that other automakers were too afraid to touch. For decades, the big players relied on the same formula: high MSRPs, dealer markups, and carefully managed incentives. Consumers grumbled, but they paid. Now, with a single bold stroke, Stellantis has exposed the fragility of that model. Once people realize a brand new truck or muscle car can be had for 35% less, the illusion of value at inflated prices shatters forever. Ford, GM, Toyota, even luxury names like BMW and Mercedes will find themselves dragged into a new era where the customer, not the manufacturer, dictates the rules. Legacy automakers, the giants that have ruled for over a century, suddenly look vulnerable. Companies that can't adapt, that can't slash costs or rethink production, will be left behind. And it's not impossible to imagine casualties. A brand that once seemed untouchable could face the same fate as Pontiac, Saturn, or Oldsmobile extinct, not because their cars were bad, but because their pricing model couldn't survive in the world Stellantis just created. Entire lineups could vanish, entire factories could shut down, and if the pressure mounts fast enough, government bailouts could once again enter the conversation. History may be about to repeat itself, but this time, triggered not by an economic collapse, but by a deliberate pricing revolution. And yet, it's not just about survival, it's about opportunity. In moments of chaos, new players rise. Chinese automakers, already eyeing the US market, may see Stellantis' move as the crack in the wall they've been waiting for. If consumers are conditioned to expect lower prices, then BYD, Geely, and other aggressive players can swoop in with EVs and hybrids priced at a fraction of what American and Japanese brands charge. Africa and India, with their rapidly growing auto industries, could also find openings to push low-cost, tech-forward vehicles into the global mainstream. Stellantis may have started this fire, but it could end up fueling competitors who are even more ruthless. And what about Stellantis itself? Right now, they look like the disruptor, the kingmaker, the one company bold enough to flip the entire market upside down. But maintaining that advantage will be brutal. Can they keep costs low enough to survive if everyone else starts swinging back? Can they manage quality and reliability under the strain of lower margins? Or will this move backfire, overwhelming them with demand they can't keep up with, creating shortages, quality issues, and angry customers? For every bold disruption, there's always a risk that success becomes its own undoing. Still, in this moment, Stellantis holds the cards. They've proven they're willing to do what others won't. They've taken Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler from afterthoughts in the American landscape to the center of the conversation. And now, every other automaker is reacting to them. This isn't just a price cut, it's a reset button on the future of cars. The industry is standing at a crossroads. And whether you're a consumer, a worker, or an investor, the road ahead looks unlike anything we've seen before. Let's imagine the first scenario, the one Stellantis is hoping for. In this version of the future, the 35% cut isn't a desperate gamble, but the opening shot in a carefully calculated master plan. Sales surge, dealers empty their lots, and consumers fall in love with the idea that Stellantis is the people's brand. Ram takes over the full-size pickup market, not because it outperforms the F-150 in every stat, but because it offers unbeatable value. Dodge floods the streets with Chargers and Challengers, creating a new generation of muscle car loyalists at a time when most rivals are abandoning performance for hybrids and EVs. Chrysler, once considered a fading relic, suddenly has a revival, pulling in families who would have otherwise gone to Toyota or Honda. Wall Street, after months of panic, starts to see Stellantis as a juggernaut, and the company's valuation soars. Other automakers scramble to catch up, but Stellantis keeps its edge by leveraging its global footprint, shared platforms, and aggressive cost-cutting. By 2030, Stellantis isn't just competing, it's leading. But then there's the darker scenario, the one nobody in the boardroom wants to admit is possible. What if this gamble spirals out of control? What if Stellantis miscalculated, slashing prices too far, too fast? In this version, the 35% cut sparks a brutal price war. Ford and GM panic and follow with massive incentives, gutting their own profitability. Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai join the fray to defend their turf. Margins evaporate across the board,